Bass Case 034, Learning Your Lines, Part 1. I'm pivoting from my last episode in which I talked about practicing without your instrument, which is valuable. And this episode concerns learning lines, which for the most part you likely do with your instrument in your hand, although sometimes you can learn without just by listening and not having it in your hand. I listen to a lot of players practice at the school I teach at, and sometimes I'm not hearing real practicing, and focus practicing, where someone is working something out. They might be working on 4 bars of a head or working out some lick or walking through some changes and working things out. That's focus practicing. And what I hear sometimes it's pieces of lines and pieces of melodies, scales and a few different keys, but there's no real start and finish of a line or melody. I just hear them come in on the part that they like to play, and then the part that they don't know, they step away from. I heard someone noodling the other day, and it was a lot of stuff, including a piece of Brubeck's Take 5, but just a piece of it, and then and I could hear that some of it, a couple of notes weren't right, and a couple key notes weren't right. And there was no form to it. And form to the practicing. And I'm starting to digress a bit to talking about fundamental practice skills, but learning lines is the heart of practicing. Take that Take 5 by Brubeck, that bass line, boo doop ba doo doo da doop up ba doo doo da boot up ba doo 4 5. How did I pick up that line? I heard the recording and picked it off. I had to play it, and I picked the line off the recording, and it took time, and it was worth it. Ba doo 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 ba doo doo doo. Footprints, Wade and Shorter from Miles Davis's album. I think it's Miles Smiles. Picked it off the recording and played it against the recording lots of times. It was fun. I still do that for fun. The other night I was playing the bass line from Steely Dan's Josie, against a track, something I learned years ago. And it's still fun to play. It's a line. And I can play the tune, you can start the track and I can play the tune start to finish. And that's, it's one of the lines. Are you doing that? Are you learning lines? Are you working on lines? It sounds so obvious in my ears, but it's the truth. It sounds so obvious to ask that question, are you learning lines? But I don't think a lot of players are. I think a lot of people are unfocused about that because it's hard work. You come to the start, like that student that was playing Take 5, and he had part of the melody, but then that was it. Learning the bridge or learning to fix those 2 notes that were wrong, that's requires work. Over the weekend, I was thinking about it. What was I going to talk about on this episode? And it kept coming back to bass lines. Here's something else that's obvious. Without bass lines, you're not a bass player. I don't care if you're talking about rock bass lines, CCM bass lines from your praise and worship group at church, your country music bass lines, hip-hop bass lines. Hip-hop lines are cool. I spent a lot of time with Dr. Dre's The Chronic more than a few years ago. There were some good lines on that record. And if a line appeals to you, you hear a line, a bass line, a saxophonist playing a line, you must learn it. That's for you. That's where you begin. One of my students, I remember this was years ago, he asked me, he goes, what lines should I learn? And I was like, well, the obvious answer that some might say all of them, but you've got to go to the one that appeals to you. Otherwise, it's already hard enough to do this. So if you're not really connected to the line, it's even going to be harder. So find lines that you want to work on, and the resources are out there. Google bass line to Josie by Steely Dan. And there's a few videos that come up by YouTube, some highly produced, of bass players playing the line. Boo doo doo boo doo boo doo. And when I say highly produced, there's notation and tab including in the video. And there's a very good camera angle of the bass neck and the fingering. You know, that's a nice resource. And it's good to use, but do yourself a favor and learn it off the recording first. You're going to learn it better like that. You're going to train your ears. And I don't think it's going to take that much longer. And then if you want to check out the YouTube video for the difficult parts that you're having a problem with hearing or playing or wondering about a fingering or wondering about a certain note in the line, yeah, do that. But do your own homework first. Peel it off the recording. You'll feel better. It's fun. And you'll get better at it. You'll say, I can't do it. I can't hear it. You know, a few years ago, I had a bass player in my studio that had a gig coming up, and he needed to learn 4 or 5 tunes, and he sent me the list, and he sent the titles, and I knew them. But I warmed him up and pulled up backing tracks for him, wrote out the lines to a couple of them, and I showed them to him. And he had taken some time with them, but he was having some problems with them, and it was a good lesson because I fixed some things. And he was like, "Is this how this one plays?" I said, "Yeah, but play it over here, you know." But that's another resource, you know, having a friend that, you know, might be slightly more advanced than you on the instrument, or having your teacher. You know, some teachers will take the time out to show you some lines. But again, do your homework. Try to peel it off the recording. You'll be a better bass player that way. Some of my students bring in copies of bass lines they've downloaded from the internet. That's another resource. It's fine, but be careful. Some of these guys didn't do it right. Go to the recording first again. You know, the Charlie Parker Omni book or those Paul Chambers transcription books of his solos. The Coltrane Omni book. These are good resources. But if you don't work through the solos via the recording, you're cheating yourself. You won't learn them right. The recording is going to give you the feel, inflections, articulations, and sound of the line. And the sheet won't give you that. It just gives you the notes. And that can be very helpful if you've done your homework first. In a lot of cases, the YouTube video of the player playing it won't give you that. You'll get the YouTube player's interpretation of the sound and feel. And you want yours. You know, like I said, if you've not done this before, go easy. If you've not transcribed, that's what we call it. Where you're taking a line, a bass line or a solo line off of recording, go easy. Don't start with Jocko's Portrait of Tracy, right? I start my players with Doug Watkins' bass line, Walking Over Sonny Rollins' Blues 7. The album Saxophone Colossus. At the top of that tune, Blues 7, there's 2 choruses of B-flat blues bass line walking. It's good and it's easy to hear because he's unaccompanied. The first chorus is just Doug playing, and the second chorus is the drums coming in with time, super quiet. And you can transcribe it. And while you're there, once you get that done, transcribe Sonny's head on Blues 7. Dee-doo, bee-ba-doo-ba-dee-da-bop, da-ba-doo, ba-ba-doo-ba-dee-da-bop, ba-da-dee-dum, ba-ba-doo-ba-dee-da-bop. That's it. It's pretty manageable. And beautifully enough, it fits on the bass neck, electric and upright, nicely. But that's a good place to start. There's other good places to start. But be mindful. I call them partials. It's things players are working on and they will not finish them. They've got a few lines worked out. They've got part of take 5 worked out. Finish that and then go start on something else. But that's a big problem. You know, they get stuck and that's the end of it. I see people, I was watching some show on HGTV, and the guy had started all these projects in his house and didn't finish them. As they brought someone in, they said, well, he started this one. And I'm like, well, we can fix that. Well, we can't do that as bass players. You're going to have to finish it yourself. Get them finished and play along with the recording and move on to the next one and keep them warm. And I'm leaving out the fact that transcribing lines and writing them out, right? Writing them out in music notation, that's good for your sight reading because you're taking sight reading from the other end. You're writing things out, you're hearing it, and then you're writing out the line. That's going to build that. But the bottom line, the recordings are where all the answers are, no matter what style of music. You know, you're learning how to walk over an F blues, or you're wanting to play a line from a Steely Dan chart. The answers are on the recordings, and the recordings, unlike when I was coming up, the recordings are available on YouTube and free. It's the best way in. And the very best way in is a recording of something you like that is accessible. I'll talk to you next time. If you have questions, email me at phil@basscase.co. I'll talk to you next time.